Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Today we are exploring the most fundamental aspect of our humanity. And today, remember, we are celebrating International Human Rights Day. And in memory, in commemoration of this great day in the history of humanity, I tend to reflect on something very fundamental, a topic that captures the very essence of our humanity. And what is it? It begins with a question. Are human rights still universal? So these are reflections on human dignity in a world losing its humanity. Good. So this presentation examines whether human rights can still be considered universal in a world marked by war, division, and moral uncertainty. Drawing from classical, religious, and enlightenment foundations of human dignity, especially in the modern periods, I argue that contemporary challenges such as selective empathy, digital misinformation, surveillance technologies, tribalism, and declining global compassion threaten the universality of human rights in practice. So this presentation diagnoses a deeper philosophical crisis. And what is it? That humanity no longer shares a common understanding of the human person. The question here comes, who is the human person? Making dignity fragile and rights negotiable. And once your rights are negotiable, my dear brothers and sisters, your rights can be played like the ball in the field. So at the end, we find that we should have a renewed moral grounding that integrates individual autonomy with relational human dignity, calling for restored empathy, global solidarity, and consistent international accountability. And therefore, with this, let's now enter into this presentation. We know very well that the celebration of today, International Human Rights Day, it comes at a very critical time. It comes at a time when the world is marked by unprecedented suffering, division, and moral uncertainty, as I said before. So across the continents, from Africa to Europe, to America, to Asia, you realize that civilians endure war, displacement, discrimination, famine, systemic injustice, and many other atrocities that affect the human person. While the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948 proclaims the universality of rights in the articles, especially at the very beginning, unfolding events today raise a profound question. Are human rights still universal, or have they become a privilege of the powerful? We have to think about this. We'll find out, we have to examine, we shall make some philosophical foundations of universality, critique the contemporary challenges facing human rights, and propose renewed conceptual grounding rooted in dignity, reason, and global solidarity. Because we know very well there are events that are unfolding, there are evidence that try to tell us that human rights are no longer universal. But then, how do we restore the universality of human rights in a world that is already torn by a lot of human rights abuses? First of all, let us understand what are human rights and what is the meaning of universal human rights. What do we mean when we say human rights are universal? Human rights are grounded in the inherent dignity of every person. In the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, the United Nations defines human rights as entitlements that every human being inherently possesses by the virtue of being human. That means the only qualification for these rights to apply to people is being human. And when we say being human, and everybody we know across all continents, everybody is a human being. All of us, we are human beings. But then you realize the atrocity is being committed, you begin to question, whether these rights still apply to every human being. Now, let's look at the classical and the religious heritage of these human rights and the meaning of the universality of these human rights. In philosophy, we have a school of thought in the ancient philosophy called Stoicism. The Stoic philosophy taught that the moral equality of all human beings is abiding. While when you come to the Christian theology, it is viewed that every person carries the image of God. It is called imago Dei. The way our philosopher, there is a philosopher, a Jewish philosopher called Moses Maimonides, he talked of imago Dei. We are created in the image of God, and therefore we have that very dignity. We have that very dignity as human beings. So you can really see from the Stoic philosophy, recognizing the moral equality of all human beings, okay, to the religious aspect of looking at the human person as imago Dei, that is the image of God, we are all equal. Let us come then to the Enlightenment period. The Enlightenment period is a period in Western philosophy which is situated within the modern period, in which philosophers began to question things, especially they began to question tradition. They began to question things of the past. And within this period, we have this Enlightenment thought. And prominent philosophers, especially Immanuel Kant and John Locke. John Locke was very, very categorical in pointing out what he calls natural rights. Locke gave shape to human rights in that way. He says every human person, every human being actually have what he called natural rights. And these rights are derived from the very dignity of the human person. And what are they? Locke pointed three of them. One, he talked of liberty, freedom. The human person has got the freedom. And then the right to own property. And then he said the right to life. These three things are very fundamental to Locke's theory of natural rights. So you can see, even within the Enlightenment, they were already talking about this. And then Kant also gave human rights a very important ground. According to Immanuel Kant, you realize that he proposes what we call the categorical imperatives. When these categorical imperatives, they apply universally, okay? They apply universally. And what is one of the most important one? The second part of the categorical imperative says that in whatever you do, you should always treat a human being as an end in himself or herself. That means that you don't need to use a human person for your own means as a means to some end, as it is happening today. You find there is what we call commodification of the human person. Even you are very suffering, gives money to somebody. People are suffering somewhere, it is posted on the media everywhere, and they ask them money, and they cannot even solve the problem, but they want you to continue suffering so that they can earn. And that is what we call commodification of the human person. So for Kant, treat a human being as an end in itself, in himself or herself. And then the other categorical imperative is, he also says that if you want to act on a principle, on a maxim that you think and you will at the same time that it becomes a universal law. So if you begin to lie, so you make sure that today when they lied to you, if somebody lied to you, you will be happy. And this has consequences for human rights. Because if you are killing other people, if you are mistreating other people, you are violating their rights. Tomorrow, if they violate your right, you should be happy. But it's the opposite. That is the Enlightenment thought. Now, then we move to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948. And what does it say? When the United Nations was formed and they established these universal rights, they proclaimed something very, very fundamental. And in Article 1, as I quote, it states that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. That is very clear. That means that nobody is elevated higher than the other people. All people are the same. This implies that we have a common human nature. And because we have a common human nature, the universality of human rights applies to all of us. And then we have a moral dignity. A a moral equality, that all of us, morally, we are all equal. Nobody is more moral than the other. A society should not be considered to be an immoral society and should therefore dwell in immorality, but this society should be enlightened. And then it also implies that rights not determined by power, tribe, nationality, and or religion. These rights are not determined by your religion, by your power, or nationality or tribe. It applies universally to every human person. So from here, we have already understood what it means universal. What do we mean when we say human rights are universal? From there, let us now look at the crisis challenging this very universality of human rights, which is rooted in the human dignity. And the first point that we have to look at is what we call selective outrage and hierarchy of suffering. Global solidarity is inconsistent. Victims in some regions receive immediate sympathy and assistance while others are ignored. This hierarchy of suffering exposes how rights become political rather than moral, and the result is human life is valued unequally. You find that today there is war in Ukraine, there is war in Sudan, there is war everywhere, and you find the way this thing is taken in these various places, the way the global community responds to it, to these conflicts in these various areas is uneven. It is not equal. And you find many people are attracted to other areas. Meanwhile, in other areas, people don't care. In Sudan, people are being harmed and nobody cares about them. You go to Ukraine, you go to Gaza, and people are enjoying somewhere. So you begin to question, what is the meaning of the universality of human rights? What is it all about? That means that lives in other places are valued more than in other places. This hierarchy of suffering is really very traumatizing. And then the other thing that challenges the very universality of human rights is the collapse of truth in a digital age. Today, with the growing technology and artificial intelligence, there are many things that are happening. And you see, wars now unfold in an environment dominated by misinformation, propaganda, and deep fakes. When truth becomes unclear or manipulated, the very possibility of justice collapses, and victims seek recognition, but their stories complete with digital noise. Today, if there is something bad that has happened somewhere, it will begin trending in the media more than ever. And as it trends, they earn money. And they want you to continue suffering, as I told you. They help you to continue suffering so that they earn money. They keep posting you on the media. And that is how the human person has been turned into what we call a commodity to be sold. It has become an object. Okay, people do not actually empathize with the suffering of this person, but instead people look at what can they get from your suffering, and that is what matters for them. So in that case, truth no longer works. Okay, what is important is what benefits the masses, what benefits those people who are who are benefiting from your suffering. You see, so this again challenges the universality of human rights. Is human rights real? Human rights real universal? Then we move ahead to the surveillance technologies and the disappearance of privacy. Today we have artificial intelligence and many other things in technology which monitor your life. Even what we are doing now, it is being monitored somewhere else. Okay? Whatever you are doing in secret, it is being monitored. The data is being collected by some organizations somewhere. There is a lot of cyber crimes. There is hacking everywhere. And you begin to wonder, surely, where is privacy? Where is freedom? Governments increasingly use artificial intelligence tools, for instance, like facial recognition, data tracking, predictive policing, and many others. So these technologies threaten privacy, autonomy, and freedom of expression. A person reduced to data cannot fully claim their dignity. So you are just, in the face of technology, you and I, we are just data. And once we are reduced to data, in that case, we cannot claim our dignity at all. So this violates the very proclamation of human rights on right to privacy. And then we move to the social and political aspect. That is tribalism, identity, and social fragmentation. In many regions today, including parts of Africa, political life is dominated by ethnic rivalry and communal suspicion. Identity becomes absolute, whether the other is seen as less human, universal rights collapse. So, in this case, look at, for instance, countries like South Sudan. You go to countries like Kenya, Uganda, Congo, and many other countries in the world. Tribalism is very high. Identity crisis is high, and there is a lot of social fragmentation. People have begun segmenting themselves for their own benefits. You find there are people in the government, they will go there for their own good, not for the good of the people. Yet the government is supposed to cater for the good of the people. So in that case, the government, which is supposed to protect the rights of the people, now cannot be able to protect it because the aspect of impartiality has disappeared. Because the very people who lead, they are the ones who pray, they are the ones who consume their own subjects. And when you begin consuming your own subjects, how can you be able to rule them? You've already objectivized them. You've already made them to be like objects that only serve your ends, affecting the categorical imperative of Immanuel Kant. However, the communal identity enriches society. And that is what Africans believe, especially when you go to Ubuntu philosophy, that they teach about what we call that communal interconnectedness and the relational aspect of the human person. But we have to be careful because when this communal identity is weaponized, it destroys the idea of equal dignity. If I only see myself as a Nuer, if I only see myself as a Lotuko, I see myself as a Choli, as a Lamo, and I see myself only in light of my tribe, that is very, very, very bad. That is very devastating because we lose our human identity in favor of tribal identities, and because of that, favoritism enters inside, a lot of nepotism enters inside. We begin looking down on others. The others are not human. The others are less human. For us, we are a royal family. These things come in. So these things threaten still the universality of human rights. And still, we have what we call declining empathy. The world is experiencing compassion fatigue. Constant exposure to suffering, especially through social media, creates emotional numbness. A global community that no longer feels the pain of others cannot sustain universal rights. If we are not able to feel the suffering of people in Sudan, in Congo, in Gaza, in Ukraine, and many households, and don't forget that in many of these peaceful countries, there are a lot of things, there are many things which today in many peaceful countries, there are many things that actually are happening that are even sometimes more serious than the ones we hear in the media. We talk of human trafficking. We talk of human trafficking. That is a very horrible one. It is enslavement. It's a form of slavery. That is very dangerous. There are people suffering in the prisons, but this your suffering it does not actually catch the attention of the world. People no longer empathize. Even if you see somebody is being harmed, they just look at it and they scroll and laugh at it. There is no empathy. It has disappeared from us. And once this has disappeared, and then we question the rights that we proclaim, are they still universal? That is a very deep question. We have to answer. So those things, these arguments, really threaten the very, very universality of human rights. However, why are human rights failing? And let us turn to philosophy a little bit. Let's look at critically the reason why these rights are failing. The ones I've just said, they threaten the universality. They tend to nullify. They tell us, they show us clearly, human rights are not universal. Okay, so now let's look at philosophically why human rights are failing. One of it is the crisis of moral anthropology. Modern societies, no longer agree on what a human being is. An autonomous individual, a product of evolution, a rational being, or a data point. They don't agree. So without a shared understanding of the person, universality becomes fragile. The biggest question is, who is the human person? What is a human being? If we don't answer this question coherently, and then we'll find that we also nullify the universality of the rights that we're talking about, the rights that we're celebrating today. But you'll find that society already have no agreement on who a human being is. I choose who I am. I choose what I am as a human being. People who are there, they choose who they are. According to Hindu philosophy and the African philosophy, the human person is a relational being. That means I exist in relation to the other people, and it's always given in the expression. It is said that I am because we are, and since we are, I am. That means I exist because the other person is there, and therefore it emphasizes that interconnectedness between me and you. Okay, when I meet you anywhere, I look at you, that now I exist because there is somebody there. I exist because there is a human being there, a human being of the same dignity as me. So for that case, it encourages that universal dignity for all human beings, and therefore nobody should be treated with the degrading punishment and all sorts of evil. So, secondly, we have the dignity under threat. Our human dignity have come under fire. There are two major foundations of dignity which are being weakened. One is the autonomy. The autonomy is being undermined by digital surveillance. I talked about the surveillance technologies. You find in many areas, there are a lot of CCTV cameras everywhere. Whatever you do in the dark, it is seen. Whatever you do where it is seen. Even what we're doing here, people in America, Europe, they are seeing us. They are seeing whatever we are doing. So, where is that autonomy? Where is that freedom? Are we still free? Are we free as human beings? No, we are not. Second, community is being undermined by tribalism and polarization. We believe in a communal life as Africans, and many parts of the world also do. But then, this communal life that we are talking about, this Ubuntu that we are talking about, it has been reduced to our tribes, to our clans, to our families. If we could extend this to a wider community, for instance, as a country, as a continent, we have to embrace each other. We employ this aspect of community to the good. But it is otherwise. Tribalism is taking over. So when dignity becomes negotiable, so rights too becomes negotiable. That means we can negotiate whether to grant you these rights or not. Your right have to be negotiated on table. We have to go to the table and say, should we wipe this community or we leave them? That is very dangerous for human dignity. And then we talk of the triumph of power over justice. The triumph of power over justice. What is power? The French philosopher Michel Foucault, he talked about power and knowledge. Power governs every aspect of our life. It actually comes from everywhere. And today, you find that power has manipulated justice. Power has used justice for its own ends. And remember, in the ancient philosophy's warning called Plato, justice is the interest of the stronger. When you go to the Plato's Republic, he talks about this. He said at a certain point, justice becomes the interest of the stronger. So it seems real today. Powerful nations determine which crisis matter. They look at which ones matter. There is crisis there, there is crisis there, there is crisis there. So they begin to weigh which one matter. The other ones, we must leave them. No, let's deal with this. Yet we say we are all human beings, created in the image of God, rational, and with human dignity. So the question is, who are we as human beings? Are we still the same rational human beings? Okay. So international law appears inconsistent, fueling a perception that rights serve political interests rather than universal morality. The Hague, the International Criminal Justice, ICC, several times tried its best to be able to implement, yeah, whatever the United Nations wanted. The treaties, to implement the treaties and the conventions enacted. Who is following these things? Who is following? Nobody is following. We are hiding criminals in our houses. We are hiding criminals in our countries, in our nations. Yet these very criminals try to threaten our rights because we have power. And because we have power, we think we can just cover justice. We can wrap it inside a suitcase. So, yes, we see they are failing. So human rights actually are failing. Yes, they are failing. But then, how do we recover the universality of human rights? So that by recovering this very universality of human rights, we can be able to restore their what? Their dignity. We can be able to bring them back to life. Now, let us look at the last part of this presentation, restoring the universality of human rights. One, regrounding human dignity. So we need a renewed understanding of the human person that integrates conscious autonomy, every person as an end in themselves. We have to begin treating people as an end in themselves. Remember, the wars are going on, they are committing a lot of crimes against humanity, but you have to know that with your little efforts, you can be able to do something. However, sometimes even we ourselves, we are unjust. We cry because of injustice, but when you go to the marketplace, even those selling vegetables, you know, they will put for you like this, they put for you vegetable like this, huh? Then they will raise it up a little bit, so it appears big, but it's actually small. So when you just handle a thing like this, it's very small. That is injustice. So the customer is actually paying for what he does not deserve. He is paying more than what he was supposed to receive. And that is injustice. And we cry for justice. So we have to make sure we look at our lives using the Kantian categorical imperatives. We treat every human being as an end in themselves. And whenever I want to do something, I have to think first, this thing I want to do, if it is done to me, will I be happy? If I will not be happy, leave it, don't do it. But if I will be happy, yes, I do it. Of course, these are limitations. Good. And then we have to also find out the understanding of a human person that integrates African communalism. A person becomes fully human through others. I talked of Ubuntu philosophy, and what the Kenyan philosopher John Beat said, that I am because you are, and since I am because we are, and since we are, I am. That means I exist because you exist. When I see you, I see me. You are my mirror, actually. You are my mirror. And because you are my mirror, okay, I can't break you. You can't break the mirror that shines in front of you, that makes you shine. You know, and you people say, hey, I'm beautiful, I'm like this. No, you can't break this mirror. So you can't kill a human being, actually, who is your equal. You can't. So when we develop an understanding of a human person that integrates this African Ubuntu philosophy, and then that way we'll be able to restore human rights. We'll be able to know that every human person has dignity as the others. Nobody is higher than them. There is no Superman. There is no Superman. Whether you are a billionaire or what or whatever, we are all human beings. You don't have a different definition. When we come to philosophy, when you go anywhere, we have to define it as a rational human person, a rational human person who is capable of morality and who is capable of deliberation and can be able to see the good. This synthesis affirms that dignity is both individual and relational. I have an individual dignity, but also I have a communal duty that is relational. Whatever I'm doing, I have to think if it might affect the other people, you know. And then secondly, rebuilding empathy and solidarity. Universal rights cannot survive without moral imagination. Education, storytelling, digital ethics, and honest leadership can rebuild empathy. So the emotional, this is the emotional foundation of human rights. Without empathy, even if you see somebody being thoroughly beaten in front of you, you just feel nothing. Nothing affects your mind. But when you have that empathy in you, when you are able to enter into the shoes of people, enter into the condition, the situation of the people in Sudan, the people in Gaza, the people in Ukraine, and the many who are suffering human trafficking in various areas, the many who are being tortured in many prisons which are underground, they are being tortured, they cannot see the sun there 24/7 for months and all this. You will feel their pain, and once you feel their pain, you can be able to help them. You can be able to advocate for their release. Governments can be able to make sure they understand that these people have rights that are inviolable. And then the other thing that we have to build in, of course, is solidarity, working together. Okay, the global community should restore the inconsistency of this global solidarity, because it appears like some lives matter more than the others because of this uneven distribution of services, uneven distribution of concern around the world. So whenever there are crises in the world, leaders have to solve them amicably with respect to equality. And then strengthening global accountability. Many people, many global leaders, they commit very terrible crimes. They commit tragedies, but you find they go unpunished. Nobody goes for them. Nobody punishes them. They go actually unpunished according to law. Nobody brings them to the Hague. Nobody brings them to ICC. And even if they are taken there, at the end of the day, nothing is done. Millions of people have died in many places since the Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. Many millions of people have died, but nobody accounted for it. Nobody at all. So there, we have to make sure we strengthen global accountability. If somebody has done something bad, according to the rights that we have, according to the treaties and the conventions enacted by the United Nations, and then they have to face the law. They have to face it. They have to make sure this person is brought to law according to those treaties. That way, by strengthening this global accountability, we will be restoring the universality of human rights. We will be giving hope to human dignity, because we are already losing this dignity. We are already losing it because of our own stubbornness. So institutions such as the United Nations and the ICC, International Criminal Court, must become more consistent and less politicized. Justice must be principled, not selective. Okay. It should be a principle, not something that should apply to particular nations and not to the other nations. It should apply universally. And therefore, with this, you realize that human rights will be restored. When we see our humanity in others, okay, when we're able to enter into the situation of others, then you will realize that we are human beings. We begin to enjoy life on this earth. And therefore, we have to begin to think, what am I doing in order to be able to accomplish the universality of human rights? What am I doing in order to make sure human rights are brought to reality? What we only see today is that even the United Nations Human Rights Commission, they are only reporting human rights. We end at the level of reporting. Oh, there are a lot of human rights violations in this country. There are a lot of human rights violations in this country, crimes against humanity. We are just reporting. So we are actually commodifying human beings, because we are employed to report, but not to act. Not to act. So we go to report and we sit behind benches, and that's all. So the person there continues to suffer, rights continue to be trampled upon, and nothing is done. So what are we actually doing practically in order to be able to restore the universality of human rights? Take note that, as I said before, human trafficking is real. Slave bondage is real. Debt bondage is real. Slavery today is real. Yet the human rights that we have, they condemned slavery in all its forms. Yet slavery has evolved from the former forms in which it manifested in society by the colonialists, for example. Today it has taken a different form. These social media that we have sometimes it enslaves us. There are a lot of things there that you find somebody scrolling the social media for 24 hours, and this person cannot focus on his life, on building his life a good and better life. And at the end of the day, the person begins to complain. So, the basic thing that we have to ask, what am I doing? What are you doing? What are these organizations doing in order to restore the universality of human rights? Are we merely reporting human rights, or are we acting on human rights? If we are not acting on human rights, then they are not effective. Because content, even if it is in books, knowledge, even if it is in books, cannot be effective unless applied to reality. Cannot. So we have to make sure in our very small ways, we have to restore the universality of human rights by making sure we can be able to act. You don't look at the United Nations Human Rights Commission, you don't look at the governments, you don't look at who, look at yourself. Immanuel Kant says, whatever you do, think. If it is going to be, if it can be made a law and the same thing is done to you and you are happy, it's okay, do it. Do it. But if you know, if it is done to you, it's going to be bad, then don't do it for the other person, because he is a human being. He has rights. You cannot violate those rights. So therefore, with the celebration of today's human rights, dear brothers and sisters, wherever you are, let us continue to meditate on this. Try to reflect, who is the human person? How can we restore the universality of human rights individually and as a community, so that human rights remain universal only if humanity remains committed to seeing every person as inherently valuable. So the crises of today do not prove that universality is false. They only prove that it is fragile. Universality is fragile. And what does it mean to say it's fragile? That means it is susceptible to damage. It is susceptible to violations. Power can be able to trample on this, on the universality of human rights. So on this Human Rights Day, the world is invited not only to defend human rights, but to defend the idea of the human person itself. The future of human rights depends on recovering our shared humanity. It depends on our shared humanity. If we are able to recover our shared humanity, this Ubuntu that we are talking about, then you realize that human rights and its universality becomes priority. And once it has become priority in our lives, in our countries, in our homes, in our houses, and in our hearts, and then we shall realize a harmonious society, a peaceful society, a society which respects human rights, and a society that looks at a human person as they look at themselves. I look at you, you are human. And because I look at you, I realize, oh, I am human. And so I have rights. So let us celebrate this day well, and let us continue to echo these questions in our mind, in our hearts. Let us continue to make sure we work for the good of human rights. We work for the realization of these rights. Thank you so much for joining us today as we celebrate this day. I wish you a happy celebration, a joyous celebration. Celebrate with your family, celebrate with whoever you may. Whenever you go anywhere, greet, say hi. Say hi, say hi. Saying hi means you recognize there is somebody who is rational. There is somebody in the other side who is human. You cannot say hi to a stone. It's only a human being who will reply, because the stone will not reply to you. And therefore, he is human. He is rational. Respect his rights. Bye-bye for now. See you next time. Let us have a joyous celebration. Bye. Bye. Have a nice evening. Is it posted? Huh? Oh, okay. Ask it again.